We are now moving into the open session. We have been in closed session since 6:30. This evening, council had a closed session meeting. Council reviewed the minutes of the closed session meeting held on January 29th, 2018, and discussed two further matters. One, first was a matter respecting the acquisition of property. Council provided further direction to staff respecting the matter. The second was a matter respecting personal matters about an identifiable individual. Council directed that an open report be brought forward. So with that, we're down to number 4. Are there any additional business to be discussed tonight, staff? Mr. Ritchie, did you want to talk about busing and Stratford, or sorry, Guelph?
Not this evening, Your Worship.
Okay. Ms. Coulter, I think you wanted to talk about the River Precinct open meeting coming up?
Thank you, Your Worship, I would.
See, I tried to guess what you guys were going to do, and I just guessed wrong. Anyone else? Okay, staff, or sorry, council. Marion.
You're not going to guess? Just a question on road resurfacing.
Okay, thanks. Councillor McManaman.
Your Worship, if I said Kreskin, a lot of people probably wouldn't know what I was talking about, but
Well,
just about minor sports registration this coming Wednesday night.
Thanks. Anyone this way? Councillor Dodd?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd just like to give an update on the Young Professionals event that's going on Thursday.
Anyone else? Yeah. Seeing none, I'll have a couple of things from Good Roads. Good. So disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. We're down to number 5 in the agenda. Anybody? Seeing none. Number 6 is confirmation of minutes.
Thanks, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor O'Leary, that the minutes of the regular council meeting held on February 12, 2018 as printed be adopted.
All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. 6B.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor O'Leary, that the minutes from the council closed session meeting held on January 29, 2018 as printed be adopted.
All in favor? That is carried. Thanks. Down to number 7.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor O'Leary, that City Council now move into Committee of the Whole to consider public meetings, deputations and presentations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports of city staff, consent agenda, committee minutes, matters postponed, motions for which notice was previously given, and additional business.
Good. Thank you. All in favor? That's carried. Thanks. We're now in Committee of the Whole. So number 8 is public meetings, and we have no public meetings. Number 9 is deputations and presentations, and we have Kim Wingrove here tonight. I understand Stuart's not available. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And Warden Halliday does send his regrets. I'm afraid he's a little under the weather this evening. However, I will endeavor to carry on. We really do appreciate the opportunity to be with you this evening and to give you a little bit of an update about what Grey County has planned for 2018. And I'll start off by a little bit of an update about our new building. We're very pleased that that is progressing and hoping that we can welcome you all to an opening of that new space later this spring. So tonight, what I really wanted to do was to give you an overview of sort of 3 different things. The county's financial situation, some key deliverables, and some of the service requirements that are driving those, as well as a few things that we're watching for the future. I am missing Stuart, who normally has a large part of this presentation. At this point, I think you're all well aware of the fact that the county's budget, we did we're able to provide a rather modest increase of just 0.36% for 2018, and that's on operating and capital of $145 million, and $55 million of that does come from property taxation. One of the things that we're watching going forward, we saw some significant assessment growth in 2017. Staff continued to budget conservatively, but we are watching that to see whether we've established a trend or a new threshold going forward. As well, the county did enjoy some additional funding from the province of Ontario that I'll speak to later on in the presentation. Our 5-year capital forecast is fairly stable year over year. Our tax policies, as are yours, come forward later on in the month of March for review. And some staff were able to participate in some additional training from MPAC, the Property Assessment Corporation. The county provides over $1 million a year to MPAC to undertake all of the assessment. They have made some significant investments in new information about the assessment base, and they offered some training to us. We want to extend that training beyond our finance departments out into the economic development and planning world as well. There's a significant amount of information there that we want to make sure that people are aware of and making the best use of. I'll go past this slide now and go to a perspective on the budget that I think that you're more familiar with. I think the takeaway from this slide is really that the county spends about 45 cents of every dollar on direct services to people, and then another third, the transportation budget, is about construction, maintenance, snow clearing, etc., for those roads and bridges that are part of the county's infrastructure. The county has a strategic plan. We have 3 goals: economic development and growth, healthy and connected communities, and excellence in governance and service. And under each of those 3 goals, we develop an annual operational plan. In 2018, economic development, I'm just going to touch very briefly on this because I think our economic development team has been to visit you recently. I did want to mostly point out around the transit options piece. This is something that's come up through our economic development work and also through our social services side, that access to transportation is a significant issue. The county put forward an application to the Community Transportation Grant Program for 2 local services, one in this area between Georgian Bluffs and Owen Sound, a second one in the southern part of the county between Hanover and Durham, and then 2 long-distance routes, one from Owen Sound east on 26 to Blue Mountain Resort, and the second south from Owen Sound and proceeding down Highway 10 to Shelburne. So we've made application to the grant program. Now we wait. We will see what the province chooses to support. Affordable housing, another piece that we're working on. You'll see some new information coming forward from that very shortly. There is the forum on attainable housing that's being held on April 7th in Meaford that you may have in your calendar. Also on economic development, I'll just speak to the tourism piece. Grey County continues to be a very popular destination for cycling. We were really happy last year to become part of the Great Lakes Waterfront Trail, and that Great Lakes Waterfront Trail does pass through Owen Sound, down Grey Road 1 and around East Bayshore, Grey Road 15, and out and onward to Meaford and through to the town of the Blue Mountains. So that's something that will be developed over the next number of years. Our second goal, services to people and enhancing community services. Last year, the province announced support for an additional 100,000 licensed childcare spaces around the province. And for us here in Grey County, this is an important part of our service delivery. We have, as you can see on the slide, more than 800 families receiving assistance with daycare fees through the county. As well, we support 40 licensed home child care providers and who have about 1,800 spaces, as well as, I've said that incorrectly, I apologize. There are 40 licensed home childcare providers with 500 or 600 spaces between them, as well as 43 licensed centers, which have 1,800 spaces. So it's quite a volume of work and service that we're looking forward to. As well as helping those providers meet their regulatory requirements and helping them to do the best job they can. We also provide some subsidy through the province to ensure that the workers there have at least made the minimum wage when that changed. In addition, financial and employment assistance for the more vulnerable members of our population. There are over 3,000 individuals in Grey County who either are provided Ontario Works or Ontario Disability Support payments. We offer those services to people online as well as in person at 5 locations across the county. We also partner with the YMCA to ensure that people who are without housing have access to emergency shelter and any mental health supports that they might require. Long-term care is an important part of our services to people. The county's committed to those 316 beds through the 3 locations. We are undertaking an operational review right now at our 3 homes. I think most interesting to this council will be the planning for a behavioral support transition unit here in Lee Manor. Lee Manor was chosen, I think, in part due to its proximity to the hospital here, but these are the folks that are really suffering from the more advanced stages of Alzheimer's and dementia. A behavioral support unit will give them a safer and more comfortable place to live. Continuing on that services to people place, our paramedic services are seeing an increasing call volume. In 2017, they responded to more than 23,000 calls for service. As well, last year we were fortunate to see some base funding, stable base funding for the community paramedicine program 5 days a week. And that's a program that we have to make sure that we help people who are suffering from chronic illness and allowing them to be able to stay in their homes. We continue to work with the province. We'd like to see that program 7 days a week if we could. It's difficult to decide what are the 2 days of the week that you're not going to work or not going to have people needing your assistance. Grey County housing, though, so this is the social housing part, different than the attainable part. Social housing is rent geared to income. These are people whose income is insufficient. They meet the low income cutoff. We are directly responsible for those 888 units that are at 32 different sites around the county. Keeping those units in good repair is a significant part of the county's budget. We spend almost $3 million a year in repairs and maintenance, making sure that we have a comfortable and safe place to live. We also work with nonprofit housing providers such as your own Owen Sound Housing. There are additional almost 500 units through those 10 different nonprofits across the county, and another 66 federally funded units. I think the thing that's most important to take away from this is that we really do want to look at this as a service to people. There's a one-window access. If you need housing, you only need to come through one door, and we will make sure that you get to the best place that it will meet your needs, and we can work with the providers around planning for that. Later on this year, in April, we were asked by the province, and this is something that's happening around Ontario, undertaking a hidden homelessness in our rural communities and enumeration. They are looking for additional data about those who might be couch surfing or otherwise not having access to a secure form of housing. We're looking for better data and partnering with the community groups to undertake that enumeration, so there will be more information coming out of that after it's complete. Finally, just a few other services. Grey Roots Museum and Archives has really tried to step it up with its programming. More recently, they've had great success with things like Morriston by Candlelight, and with the children's programming. There's I think we have had a wonderful support for our PA days, and the professional development days is what we used to call them, but for the kids, as well as March break, the toddlers program, etc. The county is also responsible for emergency management and preparedness. If there was an emergency, we would be providing shelter services. Our social services, they would help each one of our member municipalities to ensure that they have the support that they need. Finally, transportation is a big part of the county's budget, and specific to Owen Sound this year, we are going to be working on Gray Road 1, and also here, East Bay Shore and Gray Road 15 in front of the new water treatment plant. We're doing a project, I think, in partnership with yourselves for 2018. Finally, internally, making sure that we have the right people in place and developing our own people continues to be a county priority, like so many in the public sector and broader public sector. Recruitment is a challenge for us, so we want to make sure that we're investing in our own people and developing them so they're ready to step up when those inevitable retirements happen. We also have an open data portal that I would encourage everybody to have a look at, and we've really made some significant investments in a mapping technology. Again, I think it's on the next slide here. There's just one small part of what's on the Grey County map portal, and I would encourage the public to have a look at that and investigate some of the information that's there. Finally, some of the policy initiatives that we're watching. As I mentioned, we are looking for that 7-day-a-week funding for community paramedicine, something that the more rural parts of the county are looking at. The province is looking at an optional commercial and an industrial property tax class. So those with farm properties, if they want to make those kinds of investments to build a business on their farm, the business part would be taxed at the 25%, the same as the farm. So that's something that's being investigated. We all follow the asset management regulations and how that might impact our work. Human services integration, this is the basic income pilot that's happening around the province right now. We're continuing to see those services for people, the housing, the social services coming together. We want to make sure that we're on top of what those changes could mean. Our Provincial Offences Court here in Owen Sound, the province, the Attorney General has let us know that they intend to bring Part 3 offences into that court, which will be a change from the kind of work that they're doing now. So we're planning for that. And all of us, I think, are very interested in what autonomous vehicles might mean for the way that we maintain our roads, what additional requirements that might be, both from a roads perspective, but also from a planning perspective. So we have some staff looking at that. And that's the end. So thank you so much. I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Kim. Questions? Councillor Lemon?
Well, first of all, our thanks to the county for your excellent cooperation for the Odawa housing development. It's been really wonderful. Have you guys heard anything about additional housing funding? There was some talk of it and it sort of disappeared.
Yes, and I think that's something that we are continually monitoring. There's a lot of change happening there. It's my understanding that there are some agreements with other levels of government that are still under negotiation. I think once we have that information, we'll be in a better place to move forward. Certainly there have been a lot of commitments made.
Well, particularly for persons with disability. Mm-hmm. We're, as you know, building a number of units that will be completely accessible. And that appears to be a growing need, particularly where there is specialized transit available for them, et cetera. But I just was curious about that. But I do appreciate the county's assistance.
Thank you.
The housing department is a joy to work with.
Good.
And these units are, as you know, badly needed, but the wait list is humongous. I think it's up at 800.
That's actually something I neglected to mention in my remarks, was that our wait list for housing has increased 15% in the last year. It's over 730 families or individuals.
Yeah, every time you build, it seems to get larger.
Yes, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Lemon. Anyone else? Go ahead, Councilor Gregg.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here today. Kim, just a quick question. Can you elaborate more on what Part 3 offenses download is and means at the county?
It's very early days for us. We've had only, excuse me, very limited information. But Part 3 offenses are, like right now, Part 1s are the traffic tickets and liquor out of residence and things like that. Part 3 offenses are much more serious offenses that would entail potentially, sometimes jail time or very significant fines, infractions under the environmental protection laws, or dangerous driving. So these are things that would have like a more lengthy trial. So we would need to plan for pulling a much more significant body of information together to support the prosecution of those types of infractions, as well as how we're going to be working with the legal community.
Okay, thank you.
So in the past, the provincial crown attorneys have been handling them. Now they'll come to the prosecutors appointed by the county. Councilor McManaman?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to Ms. Wingrove for attending tonight. As someone that has been at times critical of the county, I think it's important to also congratulate the county. In my time on council, when I first started, there was zero interest from the county on economic development. And it did start before your time, but I think under your leadership it has blossomed, and that's one of your most important features, I think, or functions, and I congratulate you on the good work they're doing, continue to do, and for the city and the entire county. So
Thank you. It's wonderful to be able to work with all of you and your staff. Economic development is such a team effort. Like everybody needs to, and it's across all departmental lines and across every one of our member municipalities. We all need to be pulling in the same direction, and that's the kind of support we've enjoyed at the county. So,
well, we thank you for that, because that attitude speaks volumes, I think. Now, getting back to the critical part of the county, I'm just wondering, I can't recall what it's called, I think it was the road rationalization study, and again, I think it was right when you arrived, right around then, the downloading of certain roads to lower tier municipalities, bridges and roads. What's the status of that? Where are we with that?
last year, we appointed a new director of transportation, and Pat took on setting up some working groups to take a look at specific portions of that transportation master plan. Certainly one of those key recommendations was to look at the connecting links idea, as well as some transfers. So they're working through that, but in order, I think, to really do it justice, there was a significant body of detailed work that needed to be completed, so that when we come back to council with recommendations, those recommendations are solid, and we can, speak to, there's such vast differences across the county in the condition of the roads, or the requirements that would best suit a particular community when it comes to undertaking that.
Is it anticipated that would come back in 2018, 2019, just to...
I was hopeful that it was going to come back this year, in 2018. We may get to part of it and not all of it, is I think what's fair to say at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Good, thank you very much. We had Savannah here a couple of weeks ago, as you're aware, and we're all very impressed with the energy and the plan and everything, and it's great to work together. I'll be talking later about going to the auto show and working with our neighbor Al Barfoot and others across the county. It's just great that we're all working together in the same direction. So thank you for coming tonight. We wish Stuart all the best, and we're glad that you and the warden come out each year and update us. So thank you.
Thank you all very much for your time.
So next on our list is a public question period. If there's anyone in the public that wishes to ask a question, now's the time. Seeing none. Number 11, correspondence received for which direction is required, and we have no correspondence. Number 12 is our start of our reports from staff, starting at number 1, community planner respond to public question period from February 12th.
Thank you, Your Worship. At Council's last meeting during public question period, a question was asked regarding a recent Committee of Adjustment decision. There were really 4 parts to the question. The one was about the requested variance, the recommendation, and the decision of the committee, a question around affordability, accessibility, as well as garbage disposal. The Committee of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial board. They're appointed by council, but they act independent and arm's length from council. Decisions are not subject to council approval or ratification, and the OMB, soon to be the local review tribunal, is the appeal mechanism. So for the particular decision in question, public notice is given in advance of the meeting, and then there's also a 20-day appeal period. For all minor variances, the Planning Act discusses or requires 4 tests, and those are: does it conform generally with the intent and purpose of the official plan and zoning bylaw? Is it minor in nature? And is it desirable for the appropriate development and use of the lands? The staff report is attached to the report this evening. A number of people attended the hearing, and there were no appeals received. The first question was around the requested variance and the decision. So the building is a 10-unit multiple dwelling. It was destroyed by fire, and the zoning bylaw does have provisions for the reconstruction of that. There is an existing agreement with the city from 1989 for 14 parking spaces along 14th Street. So the property proposed, or the proposal to add 4 units then required a variance related to these 4 units with respect to the provision of parking spaces. So the variance was looking for relief in terms of the parking spaces for those additional units. A letter of support was provided from the applicant noting that the property was on a transit route, that there was bike and scooter parking being provided on site, and that they would not rent units if parking was required. Staff recommended in the committee, so the request was to permit 10 parking spaces, full stop, even though there were 4 additional units being added. Staff recommended, for the reasons set out in the report that's attached to the report before council this evening, and the committee approved that the minor variance be modified to require 1 parking space per unit, so the total was 14, and that no barrier-free space would be required, allowing the 4 additional spaces to be provided within 500 meters of the subject property. The second issue is with respect to affordability, and the staff report does on page 7 use the term affordable. Staff did not intend the term affordable to mean a particular definition. There are several different criteria in terms of affordable, and staff certainly will be more aware of this moving forward and will clarify the intent of the use of the term going forward. In terms of accessibility, there are 10 on-site parking spaces. The change to accommodate with a further reduction, so to take those 10 spaces and to make one of them accessible would further reduce the number of parking spaces being provided. So that seemed to be sort of counterproductive. As considered by council on February 12th, not every barrier-free dwelling unit necessitates barrier-free parking. So while the building code talks about 10% of units being barrier-free, the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act requires 4% of parking to be barrier-free. In terms of garbage, this is a matter that is not covered by zoning, but the property will be required to comply with the property standards bylaw. So, Your Worship, the recommendation is that council will receive this report for information.
Good, thank you. Councillor Dodd?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move to receive the report.
Thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor By. My question is, at what point, or how much work can a builder do prior to getting building permits issued? What's the rules in place for such activity? All permits have to be issued before any work, or can you have foundations? Where exactly do the boundaries lie on that?
So for this property, the building permit was issued for the entire structure. So the 4 additional units were within the entire structure. So it was part and parcel of the entire building. There was a subsequent permit issued after the initial permit for the development of those units for the separate residential units being proposed. Generally, if you're talking about a greenfield development, we would prefer, or the building code would stipulate that you can't dig an excavation or pour footings or foundation before you have a building permit, so.
Thank you.
Others? Call the question. All in favor? Is receipt of that? Thank you. 12B, report from Ms. Allen, I believe, with regard to council remuneration and expenses for 2017.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is an annual report itemizing council's remuneration and the total expenses. I will also note that the total budget for council expenditures was roughly $33,000, and we were $6,200 under budget at the end of 2017.
Someone want to move that? Councillor Lemon has moved it. Any discussion, questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. 12C, report from Ms. Bloomfield, I think, with regard to appointment of Integrity Commissioner.
Through you, Your Worship, Bill 68 requires that all Ontario municipalities have an Integrity Commissioner by March 1st, 2019. The Municipal Act outlines the role of the Integrity Commissioner. Grey County began the recruitment of an Integrity Commissioner and invited the lower-tier municipalities to join. Staff from 7 of the 9 lower-tier municipalities participated, including myself. Based on a review of the proposal, staff knowledge of the respective firms, and an interview process, the firm of Principals Integrity was selected as the preferred firm. Principals Integrity is operated by Jeffrey Abrams and Janice Atwood-Potofsky, 2 experienced municipal lawyers and corporate leaders with over 30 years of experience, each in a variety of Ontario municipalities. At the City of Vaughan, where Mr. Abrams was the clerk and Ms. Atwood-Potofsky was the solicitor, they led the development and implementation of a code of conduct, complaint protocol, and establishment of an Office of the Integrity Commissioner. Having both recently retired from their municipal careers, they have joined together to create Principals Integrity to provide Integrity Commissioner services for municipalities in Ontario. The operating philosophy of Principals Integrity is to ensure the existence of robust and effective policies, procedures, and mechanisms that enhance the citizens' perception that their council and local boards meet established ethical standards, and where they do not, there exists a review mechanism that serves the public interest. Although an Integrity Commissioner does not have to be appointed until 2019, I am recommending that this appointment be a priority because the requirement is coming. As well, the Integrity Commissioner pool is small and all municipalities are required to have one. Services of the desired Integrity Commissioner may be difficult to obtain if left until the compliance date. The Integrity Commissioner will assist in bringing our policies and procedures up to date. The Integrity Commissioner will provide training, and the engagement demonstrates to the citizens of Owen Sound that Council is committed to accountability and transparency. Principals Integrity has provided a professional services agreement, and the key points are that it is for a 5-year term that can be terminated with notice, and the fees include a $1,000 annual retainer and $230 per hour for other services, with per diem caps provided for training and code of conduct review. The staff recommendation in this report is for staff to bring forward a bylaw to appoint Principals Integrity as the Owen Sound's Integrity Commissioner and authorize the Mayor and Clerk to execute the professional services agreement with Principals Integrity.
Good, thank you. Councillor O'Leary?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move that recommendation.
Questions, discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Thanks, Brianna. 12D, back to Ms. Coulter with regard to Canadian National Parks.
Thank you, Your Worship. In 2016, the city had applied to Parks Canada's National Cost-Sharing Program for Heritage Places for the renovations at the CP train station. In 2017, we had requested an extension, and on February 26, 2018, after several emails back and forth and several phone calls, we received notification that the funding was approved and an agreement was forwarded. Under the program, the city will receive $54,970 for the following components: professional services, windows, interior flooring, walls and ceiling, plumbing and lighting, including heritage features, as well as project overhead. There is a full breakdown on page 7 of the draft agreement. The agreement does require that we publicly acknowledge the contribution, which we'll certainly prepare media and social media release to do that. And the agreement also requires that work will be completed by March 31st, and Kristen Schreider, our manager of property, tells me that we're in good shape to do that. So the recommendation, Your Worship, is that council would authorize a bylaw for the mayor and clerk to execute the contribution agreement for the CP station.
Thank you. Councillor Kapke?
Thank you, Your Worship. This is exciting for Owen Sound, and I think it's going to be a really neat spot to go, so I'm happy to move that recommendation.
Thanks. Discussion? Councillor O'Leary?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering if Ms. Golder could give us an update on the CP rail station. A lot of people looking forward to the opening of this brewery.
Go ahead.
Through you, Your Worship, I can. I saw some pictures. Kristen Schreider was in the building today and shared with me some pictures. So in terms of an update, the lead paint and the asbestos abatement is complete. The Phase 3 power is to the building. The new outside work, the patio, landscape, parking area is complete. The exterior drainage is done. There's drainage happening right now in the crawl space area, and the tie-in to the storm sewer is underway, as well as the separation of the sanitary system from storm. Drywall ceilings are being installed. The HVAC units are on the roof, and all that interior mechanical and electrical is ongoing. The accessible washroom is roughed in. The interior wall demolition is complete, and the interior wall additions are being completed. They've exposed some brick wall inside. Staining of the existing tongue and groove ceiling is happening. There was an additional structural support beam for the HVAC unit, some new concrete floors poured in the south end of the building, and probably the thing everyone's interested in is the brewing equipment is now being installed, and the heritage elements are being preserved, and the work on that is underway. So really great progress down there.
Good. Other questions, discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question then. All in favor? That is carried. So down to 11E. I think it's back to Ms. Bloomfield.
Through your worship, a quarterly report will be provided to council that shares statistics on the work of bylaw enforcement. The report in front of you tonight provides statistics from October to December 2017. During this time, bylaw received 290 calls. Of those calls, 245 investigations were initiated, 6 were forwarded to animal control, 29 were general inquiries, 5 were civil matters, and 5 were frivolous or unsubstantiated. The majority of complaints are respecting property standards. Snow removal, waste management, and zoning also top the list. Along with responding to complaints and performing inspections, bylaw enforcement also provides files for FOI requests, completes property inquiry requests for orders issued, prepares briefs and defense for appeals to the Property Standards Committee, assists with property cleanups, issues parking tickets, lays charges, and attends court as required. Bylaw enforcement is working at full capacity and banked 29 hours of overtime during the fourth quarter, which typically sees fewer complaints. The recommendation in this report is for council to receive the report for information purposes.
Good, thank you. Councillor Kapke?
Just a question. When it indicates that they're operating at full capacity, how many bylaw enforcement officers are there?
There are 2.
2 officers, and they handle, and then there are additional meter staff, is that correct?
That is correct.
How many meter staff?
There are 2 full-time and 1 part-time.
And this report is based only on the bylaw, not meter?
That is correct.
Okay. I'm happy to move the recommendation.
Thank you. Other discussion? Go ahead.
Thanks, everybody. Through you to Brianna, what's, I take it that Property Standards is the largest contributor to the overtime?
Yes.
Is there some sort of a mechanism for municipality to recoup some of the costs incurred due to that? Especially if it's the same individuals?
Yes, through your worship.
Go ahead.
There is a mechanism if it goes through the court process. So it would have to go, there's a bit of a process to get there, but if it goes before the courts, then there could be fines placed on the person offending, and some of those would come back to the municipality.
Thanks.
Nothing else?
No, it's good information. Thanks.
Others? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. 12F. Ms. Allen.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a report asking that council recommend that we bring forward a bylaw authorizing the mayor and clerk to sign the contribution agreement for an OCIF top-up grant. The province created the OCIF fund to provide stable funding to communities, and it is to fund core infrastructure needs. There's two components to the program. There's the formula component, which we do benefit from every year. We're currently receiving just over $600,000 on that aspect, and then there's this top-up component that is for municipalities that are below that $2 million threshold of formula funding. We have the ability to apply for up to the difference. This is the last year that we would be eligible for that grant, and fortunately we have been approved to receive that funding. So this contribution is for approximately just over $300,000, and that will go towards funding the next phase of the reconstruction of 3rd Avenue East in partnership with the County of Grey.
Thank you. Councillor McManaman, you moving that?
I wasn't going to, Your Worship.
No. Okay. Does anyone else want to? Go ahead, Councillor Lemon.
So moved.
And further discussion or questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Oh, is that a question? Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just curious, now that we have this funding in there, are we still, how is that project turning out? Are we still planning to be on schedule to be done for mid-August? End of August?
Through you, Your Worship, we're certainly looking at it. That will be very optimistic.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I'll call the question then. All in favor? That is carried. Down to 12G. Just back to Ms. Coulter, I think.
Thank you, Your Worship. The city has received a request from Sydenham Properties, Inc. Regarding an extension to the citywide development charge holiday for the 36-unit residential condo currently under construction at 9th Street East and 1st Avenue East. A conditional permit was issued for this property in October of 2015, and I note that because that's the trigger date for the DC bylaw that would come into play. So council approved the development charge bylaw in May of 2015. An amendment was approved in April of 2017 to extend the residential holiday through 2019. The original DC bylaw provided that no development charge would apply for permits issued between March 2nd, 2015 and March 1, 2016, provided that occupancy was in place by March 1st, 2018. The idea behind establishing the timeline was in part for the incentive to work, there needed to be a timeline for occupancy, which is the trigger for taxes to be paid. This development of the 36-unit residential condominium far exceeds the complexity associated with a single semi-townhouse or even a smaller multiple building. It also has undergone changes in design to address certain challenges with the site as the project has moved forward, and I gave you a bit of a timeline in the report of some of the approvals and changes that they have undertaken. The installation of the pile footing and foundation alone took many months. So council has the authority under the Act and its bylaw to enter into agreements. Staff consulted with Mr. Harold Elston as he was involved in the amendment to the DC bylaw in 2017. Mr. Elston has advised that if council wishes to permit an extension to the timeline, a written agreement with the owner would be an appropriate mechanism. A draft agreement was attached to the report for council, and the extension would be to March 1st, 2019. So the recommendation is that in consideration of the report, that council approve a bylaw to allow the mayor and clerk to execute the agreement under the Development Charges Act to provide an extension to this timing prescribed under the Development Charges bylaw to March 1, although the recommendation I've written in error to December 31st, March 1 of 2019.
So when it's moved, then it's moved with that amendment of date or
That's
correction
what
of date?
that would match the draft agreement, Your Worship, so yes.
Thank you. Councillor Dodd?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move that recommendation. Our intentions from the development charges was to include the Sydenham Heights, or the Sydenham condo development in the DC charge bylaw. That is a really complex development that they're putting there. And at this point, I know Ron Puri was here when we were having that debate and discussing about how he was, adamant about that. And I would support it for the fact that I would like to see that development go forward. That's, I think, going to be a huge change to our downtown core when we have that occupied. And at this point, I think we just need to really hope for, push for closer to occupancy. And I guess my question through you two, Ms. Coulter, would be, do we know how close they are getting to occupancy? I know every time I go by there seems to be more and more work being done.
Through you, Your Worship, I haven't been in the building myself, but I could perhaps endeavor to give council an update in terms of the progress of the project.
Okay, thank you.
So it's moved. Any other discussion? Councillor McManaman?
Thank you, Your Worship. There's been nobody that was more critical of a development charge extension than myself. I do support the motion. This has been a very complicated project. This is not a single-family dwelling. This is far more than I think anyone thought. It's taken longer than anyone thought, and it was certainly council's intent, at least I believe it was, to exempt this property, so I support the motion.
Okay, any further discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All in favor? And that has carried. 11H.
Thank you, Your Worship. Tonight there's a report with a recommended amendment to our off-road vehicles bylaw. Staff is asking for that amendment to come forward, and the changes can be summarized as followed. One, we would allow for permitted time of day use for ATVs on select roads in the city of Owen Sound, a half hour before sunrise and a half hour after sunset, meaning during the greater daylight hours. In other words, an extra hour on the road a day, and an increased amount of days during the year, most notably from November 1st to the end of November. Those would be the changes that very closely mirror those made by the County of Grey to their own off-road vehicles bylaw late last year in November 2017. In doing the research for the report, the staff are confident that these changes, while allowing for a more permissive approach to capture some of the small, albeit perhaps small, economic development benefits of increased ridership on the road, staff don't foresee any safety issues related to what's being proposed here. To go along with that would be a recommendation to renew our access agreement with the South Bruce Peninsula ATV Club, who have been a very good partner and an excellent source of research on what ATV clubs are looking for. They were very instrumental at the County of Grey as well. With that, Your Worship.
Good, thank you. Councillor O'Leary?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would move that recommendation.
Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That has carried. Thank you. 12I, back to Ms. Allen, I think. Wastewater treatment plant plan.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is a report to start the process of obtaining a debenture through, or issuing a debenture with Infrastructure Ontario to fund the final construction costs of the wastewater treatment plant, now that that project has come to substantial completion. Basically, we're asking council to bring forward a bylaw that will be submitted to Infrastructure Ontario, and there will be a few more processes between now and when the funding is transferred. I have also attached to this report a summary of the total costs of the wastewater treatment plant, showing how the funding is broken down. So our total cost was just about $48,650,000. That was roughly $150,000 under the amended budget. On top of that, we have some additional spending to be done in 2018 to bring it to a total project cost of just under $49 million. Funding that project is $15 million from each the federal and the provincial government. We've already obtained a $10 million debenture through Infrastructure Ontario, and we're using the balance from our own reserves to cover the cost of that project.
Good, thank
And
you.
that would all be funded through water and wastewater rates. That's not part of anything that comes off our tax levy.
Good, thank you. Discussion, questions, motions? Go ahead, Councillor Gregg.
I have no questions. I'd move the recommendation as it is there.
Thanks. Anyone else? Still seeing none. All in favor? That is carried. Thanks. So we're down to 12J, engineering services for protection of source protection for municipality.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be handling this one. The subject of tonight's report is Source Protection Municipal Implementation Fund Amending Agreement Number 2. The recommendation is that City Council approves the report, passes the Ontario Transfer Payment Agreement Amendment Number 2 bylaw as set out in the report. The funding provides financial assistance to the city to fund the local Source Protection Authority under the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority to assist in the development of risk management plans with existing private property owners having on-site fuel storage facilities. We originally received $58,000, Your Worship. We've spent $29,000 on this program, and signing this agreement allows us to access a further $29,000.
Good, thank you. Councillor Kepke? Doesn't matter. Somebody, go ahead.
Yeah, in layman's terms, this is something that the province placed new costs on the city, and they're backing it up with the funds necessary to pay for it. So I'll move that recommendation.
For now, wait a couple of years.
Yeah.
Other discussion? Okay, call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Down to number 13, the consent agenda.
Through your worship, on the consent agenda this evening is a report from the Facilities Booking Coordinator respecting the Sunday Morning Hockey League Players Association Easter Hockey Tournament, and a report from the Junior Planner respecting the County of Grey Plan of Subdivision. There are minutes for receipt from the Owen Sound Municipal Nonprofit Housing Corporation and the Owen Sound Housing Company. Final approval was issued for several businesses, including Mellish Appliance Service at 1333 2nd Ave East, Chakra Meditation, Home Occupation at 2433 3rd Avenue East, Health Squad at 1101 2nd Avenue East, Brook Montessori Toddler School at 435 21st Street West, Pizza Hut at 669 10th Street West, Opportunity Bridal, which is a hawker and peddler, Giant Tiger at 1350 16th Street East, and The Mat and the Easel at Home Occupation at 789 16th Street East. Lastly, there's correspondence received, which is presented for the information of council. A full listing is available at 13F.
Good, thank you very much. Go ahead.
Moved by myself that City Council receives items 13A to 13F on the consent agenda dated March 5th, 2018, and that the recommendations contained in items 13A and 13B be approved.
Call the question. All in favor? That is carried. Now, if we can come back to 13C and D, it's with regard to Owen Sound Housing. Anything to report, Councillor Lemon?
Things are moving along very well. The only question we have is the delivery of the water chamber, which was to have been in about now, I think. I don't know, haven't heard anything recently.
Do you know? Go ahead.
Oh, it is, I think it's either been delivered or it's being delivered very shortly, Your Worship. So it is coming in almost as scheduled. Staff have worked very hard to push them along.
Thank you, because that was will allow things to proceed. We are planning to invite council to the site when we get rid of the mud.
I saw there was some payment of some accounts and that you have ordered all the appliances through a local business, I think I read in there. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Good, good. Any other questions, Councillor McManaman?
Thank you, Worship. I had just a question to the Director of Community Services about the item 13B, the report about the County of Grey plan of subdivision. When I read this report, I had a sense of deja vu. This is, I think it was 2010, the city took the county and the township of Georgian Bluffs to the Ontario Municipal Board for a subdivision that is immediately beside this proposed subdivision. Just for those listening at home, it's a plan of subdivision right immediately south of Cobble Beach, right across the road from it. My question, I guess, to Ms. Coulter is, I just want to be clear, at this point, they're just asking for the city comments. Nothing has been approved, nothing has been, they're just asking what our views are on this subdivision. Is that correct?
Through your worship, that's correct. A public meeting hasn't been set, but they have asked for comments from the commenting agency. So I think it's important for the city to indicate the information that we would be looking forward and to going forward.
It doesn't specifically say, but I mean, I'm just shocked to see this is coming back again. I know it's a different property, but it's the exact same issue, urban-style development on rural services. They want to build 8 single detached homes, but they also have a plan for a much larger subdivision. By the look of the property, it'd have to be 30 or 40 homes at least. I would assume, since it's directly beside the one that was the matter before the Ontario Municipal Board, where the city was successful, by the way, of stopping that subdivision, there was many environmental, I guess the environmental reason was the best one. There was karst topography throughout that property that couldn't handle that many septic systems. And my favorite line was where it said they don't want to hook up to the Cobble Beach system because it's too expensive. As the city that has just spent about $3 million servicing water and sewer to the area near the hospital, we're well aware of how much it costs to service urban land for urban development. So I know I'm just sort of going on here, but the point being, the city cannot object enough to this type of development just outside our borders, not on urban services. I would point out, when Cobble Beach was built on full services, the city had no objections whatsoever. There were some concerns about traffic that we may still deal with in years to come, but we had no objection because it was urban development on urban services. That is not what this is. So anyway, I look forward to see, I hope the county upholds their official plan, which only allows for 5 homes before you get into a urban development. This one's asking for 8 plus who knows how many on the other property. But thank you for allowing me to rant, Your Worship. I just wanted to make sure that we were just commenting at this point and it hadn't gone any further. Thank you.
I can advise Councillor McManaman that this did come up at the county a couple of meetings ago, and I stood and raised the exact issue. It's not only that we put in services and our neighbors don't have to. You've got a business or a community right there, as you've pointed out, does have services. They have excess capacity that they could provide services for this area. We raised that at the county with the planner, and I was told we were a little premature on it, and all those things will be looked at. So we'll maintain our diligence up at the county.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Lemon.
Yeah, I am pleased at least they're having municipal water, which I'm assuming is coming from the Cobble Beach system. But
No, I don't think it is.
it isn't?
No, I think it's probably coming from East Linton, correct? Yes.
Oh, I was wrong, but the thing about the sewage in that area is what goes down there could end up in Georgian Bay, where we get our drinking water from. And I don't think it's unreasonable to ensure that we don't get massive septic development in that area because of the sensitivity, and I support what we're doing and hope we'll be informed about how this goes ahead. I don't want to go to another OMB hearing, but I really feel that somebody wasn't listening.
Good, thank you. So we've approved the consent agenda, now discussed it, so we're down to 11, which is the committee minutes for recommendation. Starting with you, Councillor Lemon, Accessibility Advisory Committee.
Yes, Your Worship. It was the introductory meeting of the new committee. There was a concern that staff is looking at, and we have two people who have severe vision, well, they're basically blind, on the committee, and they were looking for tactile mapping so they could better understand the developments, and that's being explored by staff. The other thing that came up again is the not using the messaging system which is on the buses to tell people what stops are coming up, and we're still having a problem with that. Since the meeting, I have been on the bus, and it was not audible again, and so we're going to have to come to some discussion with First Student, because it's up to them to enforce the use of that.
Okay, and with that report, you're moving approval of the minutes?
Yep.
Any questions for Councillor Lemon? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. 11B, minutes from City Hall Accommodation Committee.
Not a lot to report tonight, Your Worship. Nice to see things going up rather than being torn down. We're still on budget, and I'm not sure if I can say that about the schedule just yet. On the 20th of March, there's going to be a tour for councillors, media, staff, and then we're having a meeting afterwards, so I should be able to get some more solid information after that meeting on the 20th. And with that, I'll move approval of those minutes.
Any questions? Question? Yeah.
Thanks, Mayor Bowie. Two questions. One was, what was our original completion date on City Hall? Do you recall?
Through Your Worship, just conferring with the city manager, I think April 30th, 2018 was substantial completion. After that, it always assumes there's some time for furniture installation and commissioning of building systems. So that wouldn't be move-in date, but substantial completion.
Okay, and just second follow-up question, are you able to elaborate a bit more on the landscaping that is being done? I know at the wastewater treatment plant, one of the last items that came up for discussion and review was the amount of landscaping that had been done and the costs that were attributed to it. But at that point, it was too late to do anything about it. I'm just wondering what's the level of landscaping being done there? I just think of the wastewater treatment plant, and I'd hate to walk back down that road where we're back in the same situation and we're spending more money and can't review it. But
Yeah, through Your Worship, we certainly have a base plan in what the subcontractor or the contractor has bid on. I believe it's 47,000, although I'd have to look it up. I know that they have approved some trees. Our architect has actually put tags on some certain trees that they've already purchased. And right now it is to be done with, I believe on the tender documents it says with own forces. So our general contractor, his plan now is to use his own forces to put them in. I'm sure if he should find out as he gets closer to it that someone local might be able to give him a better price than using his own forces, I'm sure he would look at it. So that's the plan as it stands today when we assume that building.
okay, thanks.
We've approved that plan and that budget at this point already, though, correct? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to call the question for approval of those minutes. All in favor? That's carried. 11C, Councillor McManaman, Community Services.
Thank you, Worship. This was the first meeting of the new Community Services Committee. They were somewhat unhappy with the former chair, so they decided to go back to the previous chair. No, I'm just kidding. Councillor Dodd did a great job, and I was nominated chair by Councillor Dodd, so I appreciate that. Moving forward, this was one of the longest meetings we've had in some time, so I'll try and be brief, but I may not be successful with that. The first item on the agenda was the request by the Onson Rowing Club to renew their land use agreement. Some will remember back in, I think it was around 2010, there was lots of discussions with the Onson Rowing Club to try and find them a permanent home on the Inner Harbor. They'd had different spots, the old RCA building, and they were on our west side in partnership with the MacArthur Properties for storage for their boats for the club. In 2010, 2011, we started working together with the club, had a great partnership, I would say, to build the building that is currently on the Bayshore property, the north end of the north parking lot. One question, Councillor Lemon, I might as well address it right now. You had raised about whose property actually it's on. It's the former rail line that is now owned by the city. So it's not the Conservation Authority land, it actually is city property. It was a question that was raised at the committee meeting. Anyway, the rowing club and the city signed a 5-year agreement. That agreement is up in end of 2017, beginning of 2018. That agreement had been working well. I think it had worked well from the city's perspective. The agreement contemplated several things. The rowing club received a grant. They own the building. It's their building. It's on city property. So there was a couple of key points to the agreement. One was that if taxes were ever levied by Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, that would be the responsibility of the club. That will be dealt with in the next set of minutes by corporate services, but in 2017, MPAC did assess taxes to the tune of about $1,600 for that building. The other thing was the payment of an annual amount, rent, lease, whatever you want to call it, for the use of the building on city property. When they were on the west side, as I mentioned earlier, they paid an amount that was equal to the boat launch fee. They had several boats. It was at that time discussed as to so what fee should we pay, and it was felt that was a fair way to do it. When they opened the new building, it was felt that the fee should be, they had approximately 9 boats, so the charge was to be 9 boat launch fees. And again, after review now and looking at it again, we were trying to simplify it, but perhaps it would have just been simpler to have a square footage fee, because it has led to some disagreement, which I'll discuss here in a minute. For the first 4 years of the agreement, no property taxes were levied. As I said, they are now for 2017 and moving forward. For the first 4 years, the city did not collect the lease or the rent that we previously talked about. It was our mistake. We dropped the ball, but in 2017, we did ask for the fee, which was $900. Moving forward, the club, I think it's fair to say, is not overly pleased about paying $1,600 in taxes and $900 in a lease fee. We had a good, long discussion at the committee meeting about that. As I said, the taxes are sort of a separate issue that will be dealt by corporate services. About the lease fee, it was felt, I think it's fair to say that the committee felt that there should be, I know when the agreement was originally constructed, there was no problem or no discussion about that there had to be some sort of a fee to have the building on city property. When it was, and the committee felt that that was still appropriate. The $900 amount, we have sent it back to staff to bring us a report. Again, as I mentioned, simplifying the agreement, not basing it on boat launches or the number of boats, but just strictly on a square footage basis. Flat land use fee is what it was called in the motion. So, and again, looking at that $900 number, which was the number from the previous agreement that is now 5 years old. So that's the first item that was on the agenda. That took probably an hour and a half to just discuss that point. So the next thing we had was a committee orientation, where we discussed all the things community services does: building department, planning and heritage, property and building management, community development and marketing, including facility bookings and special events, and parks and open spaces. So quite a wide-ranging discussion there. The next item was the discussion for a letter from Grey Roots. The old City Hall clock and bells and clock face, the whole mechanism, is currently at Grey Roots. They wanted to know what we want to do with that. It's our property. They've offered us a 2-year agreement to keep it at Grey Roots, to store it at Grey Roots, after which time the city needs to come up with a plan what we want to do with those bells and clock face. So there might be some discussion as how we can incorporate it in the new City Hall reconstruction. We were just talking about the landscaping, perhaps with the river precinct. But either way, with this agreement with Grey Roots, we have 2 years to figure that out. I think we'd all agree there's significant heritage value there. We would just want to make sure we do it right. The next report was a request from the homeowner at 635 2nd Avenue West, the Robert McDowell House, to include them on the city's heritage register of properties of cultural heritage value and interest. As everybody knows, we have designated properties, and then we have properties that are our heritage registry. And this homeowner has asked that their property be included. Staff did a report on its architectural value, historical value, et cetera, and the committee is recommending that it does be placed on our registry. We had a report from, a letter from staff, a report from staff requesting support for the federal action on conservation of heritage properties, as we just discussed. The federal government had several recommendations set forth from their standing committee on preserving Canada's heritage. So staff, there were several recommendations in that report for us to consider. We have 4 properties: former Owen Sound bus terminal, the former Reitman store, the CPR station, and the Billy Bishop home as federal properties that are registered of historic significance. As I said, the committee's made several recommendations, and our Community Services Committee agreed with those recommendations, sending a letter to the federal government supporting that. An exciting new initiative under special events is Harbor Fest 2018. Everyone will remember the Giant Duck Festival when it came to Owen Sound, and the huge number of people that turned out on our waterfront. The plan is, I don't believe to have a giant duck this year, but on Saturday, July 14th, you can mark your calendars to have family-friendly events, stages, entertainment in the Inner Harbor on Saturday, July 14th. More details to follow about that. Now we get into the parks portion of the meeting. We're just getting warmed up. The Tom Williams Park, several capital improvements for Tom Williams Park to the tune of $15,000 for topsoil backstop repairs, the Washington ball mix, scoreboard sign, etc. That money would come from the Tom Williams Fund. So committee is recommending the council approve that. Of course, with that money also requires the approval of the executors of Mr. Williams' estate and his solicitor. So that will go, depending on council's wishes tonight, that will go to those individuals. Report on there was somebody, last meeting, I believe, talked about the Forest School. There's a renewal of the agreement for the Owen Sound Forest School for the use of Harrison Park. They rented the hall at Harrison Park 33 times last year for an additional revenue to the city of just over $2,200. Committee agreed with another 1-year agreement with that school, but we did ask we should consider for the follow-up agreement to look at if there's a difference between a not-for-profit rate for using the facilities and a for-profit rate. Again, not to get into that debate tonight, but that was one of the questions asked at the meeting, and we will discuss it when that agreement comes up next year. An exciting initiative around the Great Lakes Waterfront Trail expansion. We received a letter from that group. The Waterfront Regeneration Trust is looking to expand the Great Lakes Waterfront Trail, basically a trail that runs the entire Great Lakes through Ontario. The beauty of it would just use our established trail network. Very little work is required from the city. It would just be included in all of their correspondence, their brochures, that type of thing. The only thing that's required from the city is a $500 participation fee and us to put up several signs that tell people when they come to Owen Sound that this is part of the Great Lakes Waterfront Trail. So committee, I think, supported that initiative as well. An update on I almost feel like I should take a break, Your Worship. An update on the Reconciliation Gardens in Kelso Beach. Those are planned for the spring of 2018. There will be a garden dry stream bed design. It employs a mild curving sloping excavation to mimic a natural stream with stones cemented in place. Anyway, we saw the design at the committee. I think the public and council will be very happy with that design and the important reconciliation that it speaks to with our Native community. A request from Owen Sound Minor Soccer to put up advertising signage in the Kiwanis Soccer Complex on interior fences. It requires they would sell advertising for a certain number of signs. That money would go back right back into the park. Just note that the minor soccer has put nearly $1 million to date into that park and ongoing construction upgrades. And this money that would be generated from any advertising would go back into the park. It does require a bylaw sign amendment, an amendment to our sign bylaw to allow that, but the committee, minor soccer, would be responsible for placement, removal, and storage of the signage, and any damage, of course. That would be, anyway, the committee had recommended that we move ahead with that. The last item I would talk about are the building statistics. It was covered extensively in the local media, but I do think we should comment on it here, if I can just bring up those stats. Of course, I can't find them. They're there. In 2017, I think it's fair to say we had a banner year for building stats. The number of permits of 208 were roughly the same as we've had in other years, but the number of residential units that were built is up substantially. 91 residential units, up from 18 the year before, 67 the year before that, so either way it's up substantially. The number of single detached homes, previous years 10 homes, 15 homes, 13 homes, and it's up to 22. The value of all that construction, again, up considerably from $15 million in 2016 to $43 million in 2017. And the amount of fees paid for those buildings to our building department, again, up from about 190 in 2016 to 330,000 in 2017. Some of that construction is for City Hall, but I don't think the county building is in there. I should have asked that question before. I don't think it is.
I think it is.
You think it's in 2017?
$17 million. There's $17 million for offices, and that would probably be explained by City Hall and the county building.
All right. So there are two significant government constructions there, but either way, I do think there's no way to, you can't debate that the number of units is up substantially, the number of single detached is up substantially, and the value of construction and fees are up substantially. So very good news stories for the city. With that incredibly long overview, Your Worship, I would move the community services minutes, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Councillor McManaman. Just one question. Do you think Councillor Dodd saw you coming when he decided to nominate you?
Those minutes seem to be much shorter, didn't they?
Any questions for Councillor McManaman? Councillor Gregg?
Well, you deserve a break, so I'm going to talk a little bit. I'd like to pull look at item 9E to discuss a little bit further. I know we discussed part of this in corporate services again, which I'll speak to the tax request shortly, but I do have a few questions still regarding this, because ultimately I'm most concerned that we just reach a point of fairness for the taxpayer and for the rowing club and the contribution I think that they make in the city, and I think there's an intrinsic value to the rowing club. I know I speak for a lot of people. If you're out there early in the morning and people are being active or walking in the inner harbors, it's a very progressive image to the city to see a rowing club. And I've done a lot of looking at comparables in other southern Ontario cities to find where we stand kind of along the way here, because from a tax perspective, I know that we all would agree that they should pay taxes. It's fair. It's assessed by MPAC. Nobody, and in fact, including the rowing club in a large way, would argue that they shouldn't pay taxes. But the method that they're paying the taxes, I guess to start, it's a commercial assessment. So there's 3 valuation methods to value the property. And in this method, they're using direct cost, which is looking at the building, and it's also establishing a portion of value of the land underneath the building. So they are, the the city is receiving some monies in appreciation of that land underneath the building already. And I know, or it appears that they used to pay $500. The city, moving forward, is getting $875, I think. Yeah, $875 on the tax portion. So the taxpayer's receiving more money than they were with the new property. There is other examples of for-profits leasing city properties, paying taxes. There's lots of other examples out there of businesses or not-for-profits in city-owned establishments. There's the airport restaurant, there's the inn at the Harrison Park, the Owen Sound Attack, but all these are for-profit, and I look at the rowing club as a not-for-profit, not a charity, but a not-for-profit. There's other not-for-profits like the Blue War Curling Club, the Lawn Bowling Club, and they pay taxes, but they don't pay a second time rents to the city. So they're paying once, but not a second time. Minor sports don't pay taxes. They're a big contributor to the cost of the services in the city, but it's basically a rent or leasing of the facilities. I know we had a problem. Perhaps it's worth evaluating. There's a key question that came up, and it's maybe already been answered, but we didn't charge that that group properly for a few years, and I guess that begs the question, what was the problem? Why did it happen, and how have we acted to ensure that it won't happen again? That's perhaps something that maybe the basis of a future report from an organizational or accounting overview point of, instead of looking at and pinning blame on, I don't know, the treasurer, I don't know how they function, but that's something where we drop the ball, and we want to make sure that we capture this each and every time. So I've looked at different, I looked at the Aurelia membership. Collingwood is $335 a year. Aurelia is $435. Cambridge is $300. Peterborough is $400. And I'm trying to find other places that are comparable to Owen Sound. Peterborough's not, because they lease a building through Trent University. Collingwood kind of was. They pay $300 a year to the city, but they have outside storage, and they have to foot their bill for their off-season costs in a barn. And beyond that, getting information from the other rowing clubs at this time of year is tough because it's the off-season. So I got a little bit of fruit for my effort, but not a lot. And again, in this case, I'm just trying to, find something here that's fair for everybody, the taxpayer and the rowing club. And I note those as other examples that are out there, that when this goes back to the committee, just for information's sake. I know we had a big discussion a week ago, and there's one runner who's a late 30s guy in Owen Sound, IT software programmer, works in the city a little bit, but he's living in Owen Sound, and it's the exact person we're trying to get in our city. His comment was, the rowing club should take that $900 and spend it on marketing and get more people in it, because that's exactly what Owen Sound needs. But those are just my thoughts in terms of the rents. I kind of see them paying a second time.
Okay, responses? Councilor McManaman?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd be happy to respond. First of all, your point about not how we kind of dropped the ball there and it wasn't charged for a few years. The city manager was at the meeting. The city manager is I think that's directly under his purview, and we leave it to he's heard from committee and council our views on that, and I think he will follow up with that accordingly. I'm not sure we need to say too much more about that. I would agree with you that we need to have fairness to the taxpayer. We had a report last meeting that talked about our fees and charges bylaw. Approximately 12% of the money that's taken in by the city, nearly $4 million, are for fees, charges, and those types of things, not taxes. Fees and charges that are for city property, city use of city facilities. Any money that's not collected through fees and charges is collected through taxes. I don't know how you can make a discussion about not having fees and charges And, well, you can, and it has been done at this council in the past, but then there's a corresponding raise in taxes. You talked about fairness to the taxpayer, and I couldn't agree more. I think we need to be fair to the taxpayer. If someone is using city property, they need to pay a fair amount for it. If there are examples out there, and there probably are, of that not happening, I would encourage every member of council here, when that comes forward, to point it out and make sure that we are treating everyone fairly. I don't think that means we take everybody down to saying nobody pays anything. What I would suggest is it means that everybody's got to pay something in fees towards us. We've had that discussion before. Sometimes there's other factors out there that why we charge more or why we charge less. But again, I would just encourage anytime an agreement comes forward, I don't think we're going to break any of our current lease agreements. When a new one comes forward, ask yourself, are they paying a fair amount? That's all we can do. In this case, you mentioned the curling club and the bowling club. You're right, they pay taxes and they don't pay a fee. They also own the property. They had to presumably acquire it at some point, somewhere. They had to pay for that. It wasn't, I'm trying to think of a word, gifted to them by the city. They had to buy it. So it's a different example. You are right, there's many, many leases out there. Harrison Park Inn, the Attack, you mentioned a number. The new CP station we just talked about, they will be paying taxes. They will be paying a fee for being on city property. They are for-profits. Perhaps that is different. But the airport is another one. They pay, people that own leases and hangars out there, they pay taxes. They also pay a lease of 45 cents a square foot. The direction from committee was come back with a fee in the neighborhood of $900. I don't think that's going to come anywhere near, well, it'll be, I guess we'll wait for the report. The airport pays 45 cents a square foot. It'd be interesting to see what this fee comes back at, because I'll bet it's not anywhere near 45 cents a square foot. So if we want to talk fairness, then let's be fair to the airport owners and charge 45 cents a square foot. See what number we're at. But we need to keep in mind, you had mentioned, and you did some homework here to look at different clubs. I think it was pointed out at the meeting that the fee, the charge for the rowing club was $300 a year, and if these costs went through, it was going to go to $400. It sounds from your research that that's right in the ballpark for what other rowing clubs pay. So I don't think that's at all being unfair to the club. And anyway, again, it was asked several times in the meeting, what is a fair amount? And it was not answered. In my mind, having a location, how far is that from the water? 100 yards from the water, prime location, to pay the amount that's being asked here is not at all unreasonable. Fairness to the taxpayer, I couldn't agree more. If we're going to start discounting people not having to pay a fair fee, and you could argue that $900, as I just said, is not anywhere near a fair fee. It should be a lot more than that. Minor hockey pays $100,000 a year. Minor soccer pays $20,000 a year. We're talking $900 here. Anyway, I would suggest it was the unanimous feeling of the committee, and any other committee members can correct me if I'm out of line here, that $900 was more than fair, and the report to come back to council or to committee was to look at a square footage fee per square foot, and look at other examples of what a fair square foot fee is, and that will come back, I'm assuming, to this council we're in March, in April, I guess. But anyway, I think we are being extremely fair here. I don't think we're being punitive. I don't think we've done anything other than follow through on, and I haven't even mentioned this, there was an agreement with the rowing club that they would pay taxes and they would pay a fee. That's what the agreement says. So anyway, I think that's all I have to say at this time, Your Worship.
Councillor Kepke, I think you had your hand up next.
I have nothing further, Your Worship. I think everything's been said. Thank you.
Councillor Lemon?
Well, the question, first of all, you would need the wisdom of Solomon to know what exactly is the real cost. The analogy you gave of the Bay Shore or the Attack are using a multi-million-dollar facility which was built by the city. The land that in question it sits on, which turns out to be railway land, we acquired at a very, very low price quite a few years ago. I don't know what the right fee is. but this is the kind of thing we want on our waterfront. And if you want to charge a fair rate, how much do we charge people to launch their boats, and what is the value of that land? I would suggest being located next door to the sewage treatment plant, which it is, probably adversely affects its value because of the waterfront. And so I think we have to take everything into consideration. And obviously, it has to be on the water. It's for boats, which I don't think we need to be rocket scientists to work that out. But be very careful on what we do here, because this is the kind of thing we want around the bay. This is the kind of thing that attracts attention.
Good, thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none, so we have the minutes that are before us for approval. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Carried. It's carried unanimously. Okay. 14D, Councillor Gregg, Corporate Services Committee.
Thanks, Mayor Boddy. The February meeting for Corporate Services, we entertained a request from the Rowing Club for a tax rebate for a registered charity. As the report notes, the Rowing Club's not a registered charity. They are a not-for-profit, and there's a distinct difference. The tax rebate for a registered charity program actually kind of piggybacks off of the county bylaw and would require proposed, or I guess an amendment or change at that end as well. But however, committee did not support the request, being that they're a not-for-profit and not a registered charity, for a request for a tax deduction for the boathouse. We had a monthly information report on time management from the fire chief, and we've also had a finalized agreement with the county on a tiered response. There's a couple just small changes or corrections to the minutes I might just point out right now. It was Deputy Mayor Wright who moved the information report on time management, and Vice Chair Kepke who moved the finalized agreement with the county on the tiered response. I do see that Fire Chief is here tonight if anyone has any questions on the time management report. It's the information we get every month. The finalized agreement with the county on tiered response was asked to come back to the committee because it had to be clarified to show that our fire department would leave a response to a medical call if a fire call came in. The initial agreement did not spell that out clearly, so that had to go back to the county for clarification, which it did. So we have that agreement to finalize tonight. We have a report for 2 property tax sales. They've been communicated through the media. There's minimum tenders of $24,318 on one, and a commercial property of $139,925. You may ask why the commercial property owing is so much more. This is an example where substantial utility bills, such as water, go unpaid and then get added to the property tax owing, and then shows also the cost of registering some of these properties for tax sale. So there's 2 committee moved receipt of that report. We had a information report on our property taxes receivable. The city collects and remits, as you all know, all the taxes for the county and the school boards and remits them up front. However, not all the time are we collecting the taxes that are owed to us. We have a measurement between 10 and 15% property taxes receivable is a moderate risk level. Our current in 2017 was 5.8%, so we're in a low risk of property taxes receivable yet. They are secure, given that property taxes form a first priority lien, so it's a very low risk receivable. It does just tie up the cash flow at times, which the city could, any business doesn't want to have your tax or have your cash tied up. So it does affect your cash flow from a business standpoint. Committee received the report. We had a report for information and some sections or some proposed changes due to some changes in Bill 68, which we've had lots of information about in the last year, but there's two sections have enacted the potential for municipalities to change the parameters around proceeding with a tax sale. The information is there, but being that it's a provincially led, it's because they changed Bill 68, and that's what has precipitated it. I just wanted to let Kate speak tonight, and she can speak to why municipalities see this as a positive, or why municipalities have actually see this as a benefit in the two changes that the City of Owen Sound's looking at enacting, resulting from it. So if you want to speak to that now.
Sure. Through your worship, Bill 68 amended the Municipal Act effective May of last year. And one of the changes allows us to start the process for tax sale at 2 years when a property has unpaid taxes in arrears for 2 years, as opposed to 3, which it currently is. It still requires a full year once registered before we can consider a tax sale proceeding. We're currently working on a comprehensive tax policy that will come through corporate services, and it will more specifically lay out the criteria that we would follow before proceeding to tax sale. For example, we may choose to look at properties where the balance owing exceeds a certain percentage threshold of assessed value in addition to meeting that 2-year criteria. And if nothing else, it's often that letter that we send to property owners as a final reminder that registration is imminent, that encourages them to get out of arrears and improves our cash flow. In addition to that, we're asking for authorization for the Director of Corporate Services to approve extension agreements where we previously needed council resolution. This just allows us to deal with the property owner to accept a payment plan, and not having to bring that for council approval allows us to speed up the process in the context that is quite time sensitive.
Thanks, Ms. Allen. I see a question right now.
Councillor Lemon?
What is the percentage penalty on overdue taxes currently? 15%? 1.5%.
25, excuse me.
Pardon?
1.25% per month.
Okay, so that's 15%, roughly. And we're actually doing very well on the arrears. And we have it as a budget line for the amount of money we receive each year. If everybody paid their taxes exactly on time, we would have to make up that amount of money somewhere else in the budget. So, I mean, if you go to the bank, you get what, 2% for your money? And we're getting 15%. That's something to think about.
If I could, Your Worship, certainly the speeding the process up has several effects, and I think the least important one is on the city's bottom line. I do think we're trying to work with taxpayers to make sure that they don't get themselves in financial difficulty around their taxes. As Ms. Allen has mentioned, some ratepayers don't pay attention to the annual mailing of the bill, but they do pay attention to the fact that the city may be taking action. So I do think it helps some of them to avoid us having to take action, actually being notified that we will. So to me, I think that's the greatest initiative around this. It isn't to improve or hurt our bottom line, it's to hopefully help some taxpayers that perhaps need direct notification that something's going to happen.
Thanks, Mayor Ritchie. Yeah, it's going to help people from municipalities' vantage points everywhere to help them stop the snowball before the snowball gets too big and out of control. The committee also had a review of second half tenders and RFPs over $50,000 for information. I would note, I guess most noticeable, and you're familiar with it from budget, only the flat roof at the bus terminal was done last year because of the costs that came in, and the increasing snow removal costs, which we're all very well aware of. So we received that for information. We are also looking at a proposed change in our long-term disability provider. People Corp has been hired by the city to examine our benefit programs. A suggestion has been made to move the long-term disability provider to Cigna from Sun Life. And as you can see in the report, potential approximate savings over 3 years of $146,000 may be realized. This change is contingent upon the Police Services Board approval and the approval of our unions. Obviously, it has to be citywide. It can't just be piecework, piecemeal through parts of the city. But there will be no changes in or reduction in the coverage if it is implemented. Employees currently on long-term disability will remain and see no change. Other local municipalities have switched already and did provide positive feedback to our staff when they were looking at the proposed change and getting information on it. I would note, and you see in the minutes it's shown that Cigna has momentarily, and I'm not sure we've heard anything new in the last couple of weeks, but we are awaiting clarification from Cigna as to whether they're willing to or able to move ahead with the program. At this time, there is seemingly a temporary just stay in place right now. So that's what we are looking at, and it seems to be all positive from the city vantage point, and no reduction in coverages for our employees. We received that for information and felt that is good to move ahead with as long as Cigna is back in place to move forward with the program. And we had an update on a parking enforcement officer at Heritage Place Mall, just a staff change. So with that, I would ask approval of those minutes.
Thank you. Councillor Kepke?
Just a comment, Your Worship, under Human Resources, I believe you mentioned that approval is needed from police services and the unions. The unions do not approve this. They are just notified of it. Thank you.
With that, Councillor Lemon?
My question is, if police services doesn't like the change, can they block us making any change?
Yes, but I have no reason to think that they will not.
They'd
be
be
on
turning
side
down
with
a
this.
savings.
Exactly.
Okay, so they can't ultimately block the city from changing the
I
budget?
think it's moot.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to call the question. All in favor of approval of those minutes? That is carried. Councillor Dodd, you're now the Chair of Economic Development.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Mayor Boddy. I just wanted to wonder if there was maybe a comparison to the length of meetings, depending on the Chair of Community Services. That was a 2.5-hour doozy that we just dealt with that one.
We're hoping to let you chair it.
Yeah, where was everyone? Okay, so just a quick update on economic development. As Councillor Lemon had indicated earlier, this was our first meeting under the new committee structure. So our first thing that we basically did was go over committee orientation. What is economic development? What's their committee's mandate? We went through the 2018 work plan priorities. One of the things I did want to draw attention to was Yuri Rosa. Mr. Rosa was one of the successful applicants of the Are You Most campaign. So it was nice to have him sitting at our meeting. He had moved up from the city and already has his business in place called Bearwood Inn, and it's already moving on, and he's doing well. Him and his wife moved up, bought a house, and they're working. So I thought that was a really big success story to see them, and he came to the meeting as well, which is amazing. Next, we got a verbal update from the Director of Community Services regarding the Retail Business Holidays Act. The update was based that in December of 2016, the province had created a new section for the Retail Holiday or Business Holidays Act that would allow municipalities to exempt an entire municipality from the act. This was just an update from a previous discussion that happened in the previous committee term, but committee decided they would prefer to follow through with this initial recommendation of just a draft guideline and application where specific businesses or a group of businesses could apply for exemption under that act. still, that draft guideline and application form is going to be passed on to the DIA and the Chamber of Commerce for review and feedback. We had a quick update on the Business Enterprise Center, some of the successes that they had seen. We went through the 2018 work plan priorities. We discussed tourism, about some of their priorities. Some of the highlights of 2017 was the city's 160th anniversary celebrations, including the Waterfront Festival, the Are the You Most campaign, Salmon Celebration, the Corkscrew City Cask Night, the Scenic City Film Festival. This is one thing I found was pretty interesting as well. Our visitor center welcomed more than 12,600 people in 2017, and they keep track of this, and 41% of those were from over 4 hours away, which means that they would be staying overnight in the area, which is amazing. And those are my minutes, so I'd move approval of those minutes.
Good, thank you. Questions? Go ahead.
Just a question to Councillor Dodd. The Business Enterprise Center, I understand, is moving to Grey County.
Business Enterprise Center, I'm sure City Manager would be more than...
My question is, though, they're becoming more part of the county. Will they still be involved in our economic development?
I'm assuming Jane would. Jane is not a voting member. She's there for support. There's a lot of members that are there that come to our meetings as a supportive role there for our meetings. So I'm assuming if she's still, whether there's something on that agenda that she could bring to, I'm sure she'd be invited and be more than welcome to come.
Savannah comes from the county, too. Okay. All in favor? That's carried. Operations minute. Are you doing those tonight?
I can do that. As Councillor O'Leary was away checking out hockey teams, I think for a couple of days, and having a well-deserved holiday. So we had deputation from Mike Elliott, who was representing owners of a condo just north of 16th Street along 9th Avenue East, concerned about the state of 9th Avenue in front of Staveley Court condominiums, and he was speaking on behalf of all the residences with the state of that street. Unfortunately, committee brought the news to Mr. Elliott that that street's going to get worse yet in the foreseeable future, because we are going to be undertaking reconstruction of Gray Road right outside of the Harry Lumley Bayshore, and that road, 9th Avenue, will once again be under heavier traffic because it's the alternative route, or the detour route, that many people will need. So there's not much can be done in the immediate future. However, committee did make a motion that council and staff look at, and it was done last year, and I know Councillor McMahon mentioned sometimes you get a street in such a poor state of disrepair that even though it's in the 3 or 4 or 5 year long-term capital plan, it becomes kind of imperative to do a shave and pave, and just north of Moores Hill was an example of that. That was in terrible disrepair and dangerous for bikes. So this is in a similar situation where perhaps at the end of the road work outside the Harry Lumley Bayshore this year, a shave and pave or some minor improvements can be made to 9th Avenue. And the good news is that we heard earlier tonight, our OCIF funding was approved, which now frees up $375,000, I think it is, of our gas tax to be utilized for resurfacing projects in 2018. So, the committee is hopeful that that can be considered for evaluation. We had the airport report for the month had some poor weather, which impacts no-fly days. I would just make a comment here that does not show a mover for receipt of that report. It was Councillor Thomas moved receipt of that, and it was carried unanimously. We had an engineering report on on-street parking limitations, in particular to 11th Street West. There's a concern with a bus that's parking for a couple hours a day Our staff has been in touch with the school board several times about it, but the concern with neighbors and residents is that where the bus parks, traffic on 4th Avenue West often turns left at 11th Street as they try to go to the stoplight at 3rd Avenue instead of pulling out to 4th Avenue and having an uncontrolled intersection to turn at. So it does receive quite a bit of turning traffic, and the school bus can impede visibility. So staff is temporarily looking at a reduction in the parking stalls as a temporary measure to alleviate the concerns there. However, we do note that there's been many concerns brought to the city, and we've got a much more in-depth report coming further in the spring, which will deal with large object parking such as buses, large trucks, campers, boats, and that'll be coming both to corporate services and operations in a couple months yet. So at this time, we didn't want to, committee didn't want to apply a specific amendment to any bylaws for this case, only to amend or alter the stalls as they're laid out, and hopefully that school bus will just find another place or park at First Student and not cause an issue on that street. We then had a very in-depth report on the low-pressure event, which we experienced January 10th with the rupture of our water main just outside of Hobart's, and subsequent recommendations for the lessons learned from that. Mr. Prentice did a great job, very informative report for the committee, but on January 10th, we had a 20-centimeter cast iron pipe for a fire service line for Hobart's experienced a break. It was immediately detected by treatment plant staff as the flow increased dramatically due to the size and close proximity to the high-pressure industrial trunk main at the water treatment plant. So all the bells went off. It was not hard to locate the break because it eradicated the chunk of road due to the size of it. Due to the high flow, the industrial pressure zone drained rapidly, resulting in negative pressure, and our fire department reported a water meter spinning backwards, which precipitated the do not use order because it was conclusive proof that negative pressure or backflow could potentially have entered our water system. And challenges with that do not use order is in today's climate, so many people are familiar with the do not boil advisories that seem to repeatedly come out, and it can be a challenge then from a municipal standpoint of ensuring that people are respecting and acknowledging that it's a do not use water at all, not just a do not boil. But that's part of the communications lessons learned, but all turned out excellent. We had a meeting with the health unit, and the MOE determined the backflow did not contain any specific chemical threat, and flushing with chlorine and sampling began. The industrial pressure zone was being fed by the East Hill zone at a higher than normal pressure due to two rocks that then subsequently got flushed into a valve, which is situated in the adjoining areas. We've got several valves then that control the flows between our, I guess we've got six pressure zones in the city. This break occurred in the municipal zone. The industrial pressure zone, the municipal zone, is a large portion of the northwest and northeast sides of Owen Sound. It's bordered to the south or our downtown by the Spring Zone. The northeast side of the city is the industrial pressure zone, which is the area where staff worked diligently to get all the notices out to the residences, the businesses, make sure everybody was aware not to use the water. We've got the East Hill pressure zone, which is south of 10th Street, obviously up on the hill, and that's the zone that serviced the industrial pressure zone due to the break. We've got the East Hill reduced zone, which is between the downtown and the East Hill, and then we've got a booster station largely servicing the southwest quadrant. one of the recommendations, and all the recommendations moving forward do have financial impacts, so that at some point they will be coming forward to budget for consideration, and we'll also have subsequent staff reports that Operations Committee will see with each of these. But one of the recommendations is to install instrumentation in at least 3 of these valve chambers for real-time pressure information for staff. We've got a recommendation for the implementation of check valves and pressure control valve locations. I guess in this situation, it's easy to note that it was very easy to find the break. The road was washed out and gone. So there may be other times where breaks aren't that clearly obvious, and it could take staff a lot of time to be able to locate these. So with the further implementation of check valves and pressures, it would help staff be able to identify if there's a break somewhere, for instance, in the downtown zone or in the, the municipal zone just north of 14th Street. So it could be very helpful in future break situations. We had a recommendation 3 on the door-to-door communication policy, which in this case was outstanding. Staff was outstanding, as was the Great Beach Health Unit every step of the way here. One lesson learned was the delineation of the pressure zones in this instance was along 9th Avenue, but retrospectively, we would notify residents on both sides of the street and not just the east side of 9th Avenue, as was the case in this time. It's better to err on the side of caution than not. So that's something moving forward that Mr. Prentice felt would be wise. And also recommendation 4, a future report on backflow prevention program implementation. As you're all familiar, we've invested $100,000 in the last 2 years, $50,000 per year on a study on backflow prevention. It's mandated in current building codes that backflow preventers have to be installed, but we have this study that's being done now, and the data collected will be coming to Operations Committee in the future for evaluation. We also had, the committee moved the report reception unanimously and the recommendations therein. And we had a last report on the drinking water quality management standard. This was an internal review by staff prior to the external audit, which gets done in March. And one of the key things is continuation of leak detection every 3 years, but I guess the most practical or the biggest experience from this is that there was a situation that would be done in 2018 of the emergency response plan, but on January 10th, the breaking pipe actually implemented and tested that plan. So it was interesting. We've had the situation we were looking at doing a simulation in 2018, but here we had a real life scenario in January. So with that, I would ask receipt of those minutes.
Thank you.
Can I just clarify something in the report? Councillor Gregg was referring to the advisories and incorrectly referred to it as a do not boil advisory, and what people get confused by is the boil water advisory. When they hear there's something wrong with the water, they immediately think they can boil it and everything will be okay, and Mr. Prentice was clearly pointing out that in a do not use scenario, boiling the water does not help. So that was the clear delineation that they want to make, and they want to get that word out to the public so that people understand do not use means do not use. Thank you.
Good, thanks. I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that no one's got any questions. There's a fair bit of detail on that. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Councillor Thomas. Tom Thompson Art Gallery.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. We had the inaugural meeting of the new Tom Thompson Art Gallery Advisory Committee on February 26th, and it was really, I would term it as a getting-to-know-you kind of a meeting. We had new members who have not been involved in the past. We had a couple of returning members, and we Had a good talk from the acting director, David Huff, about the history of the gallery, how it came to be in the community, where it came from, and the people who supported it in the early days. We then had a complete tour of all of the galleries and the storage vaults as well in the building, so we got a good sense of how tight space can be in the building with the collection. We also had a look at the budget for 2018, which is really a sustainable budget for the gallery. It includes a $50,000 payback to the city to start working on that deficit we've heard so much about. And that is primarily what occurred at that meeting, and with that, I would ask that we approve the minutes.
Good, thank you. Questions? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So that gets us through our committee minutes. Down to matters postponed. There are no postponed matters, and that's at number 15. Number 16, motions for which notice was previously given, and we have none. Discussion of additional business. Ms. Coulter, you're probably prepared by now to...
Thank you, Your Worship, for the reminder. On Tuesday, March 13th at 5:30 p.m., our Operations Advisory Committee will be hosting a meeting, and the focus of that meeting will be the Downtown River Precinct. So last fall, we had a public meeting through the environmental assessment process. A number of comments, issues, concerns were raised. This is an opportunity to come back and revisit some of those and provide additional information. So that meeting will be at the Harmony Center Studio, Tuesday, March 13th. That's a week from tomorrow at 5:30 p.m.
Good, thank you. Mr. Ritchie.
If I could, Your Worship, your comments have tweaked me to that I do perhaps want to discuss that the city has applied for, through a transportation fund grant, for a 5-year proposal to run transit service between the city and Guelph on a daily basis. We've put in, I think, a very good application. We have support from other municipalities in the area, as well as municipalities along that route. I am very optimistic we will hear good news. It would certainly be great for areas of the residents of our area and everyone along the route between here to Guelph. So stay tuned. When we hear, certainly we will bring that information back.
Guelph's a great link at that end to Hamilton, Toronto, Kitchener, London, all over, so that's good. Thank you. Councillor Kepke.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's the time of year when people are asking about potholes being repaired and road resurfacing, so I wondered if I could indulge and ask the city manager to provide the public with a bit of an update on the resurfacing work plan and the progress that's come to date.
Certainly, through Your Worship, this year's resurfacing program, we have a budget of $350,000. We currently have 9 projects listed, one of which is 9th Avenue between 16th and 20th Street. This is for what we term the repaves. That would get us, we're hoping to get us 2,400 meters of work repaved done in the city this year. As well, we have our ongoing upgrades, and Ms. Allen had mentioned earlier, one of them is outside the wastewater treatment plant. That's the second phase of that project, going from where we finished off in the first phase out to 20th Street. The road part of that is $1 million. It's a $2.6 million project that we're sharing with the county. They are contributing $1 million, we're contributing the difference. As well, we were putting a new road into Harrison Park. We just closed that tender today, or the bids were in. So that's a significant new pavement in the city as well. And we also have a number of other grant applications in that, if successful, will lead to more repair work in the city this year. On potholes, currently our staff are using cold mix to repair potholes in the worst areas of town. Cold mix doesn't work as well as the hot mix. When the asphalt plants are open shortly, they will be using hot mix with our own staff, and that should repair the worst potholes where we're not either going to do a repave or an upgrade. So certainly much in the budget. I talked to Mr. Webb today, and we feel we probably, quite honestly, will be at full capacity of human resources to get all of this work done this year. So I think it'll be as much paving as we've done in a lot of years.
Good, thank you. Is that good? Good, thank you. Councillor McManaman.
Thank you, Worship. Just a reminder to all the parents, grandparents, kids, I guess, if they're still watching, kids at home, the minor sports registration is this coming Wednesday night, March 7th, 5:30 to 8 p.m. at the Bayshore Community Center. If you're hoping to play minor sports this summer, this coming Wednesday, March 7th, 5:38 at the Bayshore. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dodd.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have some good news. Myself, I was working with some members from Grey County and an individual from the Great Bruce Regional Health Services, and we were putting together a creative mixer for young professionals. This had been in the works for the last couple of months. It's coming up this Thursday, March 8th, and I can actually say that it is sold out. At Hartwood Hall, they have a capacity of 148 people, and they have all RSVP'd, and those are now, we're on a wait list of individuals between the ages of 20 and 40 who would be interested in having as an idea of a retention mindset, really. So this is going from small business owners, individuals in IT, real estate agents, your chiropractors, your doctors, your anything basically that we could get a handle on. Was sent out an invitation. This was out through social media. And it was one of the things that we had heard from both from the Great Bruce Regional Health Services and from the county was we don't really have an issue of bringing individuals, youth, into the region. We have a hard time retaining them. It's really easy for them to maintain their grassroots in other municipalities, and they live in Owen Sound from Monday to Friday, and on weekends they venture back off home, and then when a new opportunity comes up, they leave. So this was more of a mindset of being able to mingle some of the individuals who may not be originally from Owen Sound, or may have left for schooling, or may have left to start their career and coming back, and putting them back in the same room with 147 other individuals who could say maybe you have an interest in soccer, or maybe you have a business interest, or maybe you have something where you can create some better relationships and some connections where those individuals don't feel like Owen Sound is just a short-term stay, that they can start building their grassroots here. So everything that we had heard from both like Great Bruce Regional Health Services and Grey County was about retention, and so this was a creative mixer this Thursday, March 8th. So if anyone is still interested there, you can still apply on the wait list in case individuals aren't able to attend on Thursday. Everyone has RSVP, but if they cannot attend, you can be on a wait list, and that's only due to max capacity at the Hartwood Hall. So sorry, it's Thursday at 7 to 10 at Hartwood Hall.
Good, thank you. I've got a couple things. I attended in behalf of the city to the Toronto International Auto Show on Saturday and Sunday with Cobble Beach. They host something called Art in the Automobile there to help promote their Concours d'Elegance. And this year's Toronto International Auto Show, it is the biggest consumer product show in Canada. They had 538,842 people through the gate over the week. It's a lot of people. Not all, of course, probably made it through Art in the Automobile, but many, many, many did. So it was a great opportunity for us to go down and promote the area. They had 15 cars ranging from a 1907 American Eagle to, what would be the oldest one or the newest one? Probably a Shelby Cobra that was, for somebody that's a car buff, it was a 427 cubic inch engine, which was huge in this little thing, from 1965. The cars are a big hit. They're similar to the cars that will be at the Concours d'Elegance. We were there with big maps promoting the area, inviting people up, promoting Owen Sound, promoting Grey County. I know Steve Furness and was down there. Savannah were down there for a couple of days. Our Paulette was down there for a day. Al Barfoot was down there for a day. Bill Walker sat in for a day. I did Saturday and Sunday, and it was amazing the number of people that know where we are compared to the first year that we went down, and we didn't have the same response. Nobody knew where we were at the time, and it's really growing, and it's a great opportunity to promote our area to a huge number of people. Most people are there from Toronto region, a lot from Hamilton, Kitchener, Waterloo, Barrie, Peterborough, right across the province, but it was a lot of fun. From there, Councillor O'Leary and I attended the Good Roads Conference at the Royal York for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday morning. I saw some great people. I think you probably saw some different things that were pretty amazing. keynote speakers, there was a couple of economists that were really interesting. One in particular was talking about the change of housing and housing demands. I've been able to find that person online and send it through to Pam to follow through. The economic study on housing and affordable housing was very interesting. It came from a whole different perspective. There's also a gentleman there that was from the Netherlands talking about the smartest places in the world. So he's talking about what was Rust Belt is now Brain Belt, and a lot of the things that he talked about were aiming in the right direction. We're doing a lot of the things that these big cities have done and heading in the right direction, although we're not there yet. So it was a very good learning experience, and came back. Probably staff hates when we come back with these things because we come back with a million ideas, and it's we haven't set the budget, we haven't set the time, and it's hard to get to. But anyway, I'll pass those things on to council and to staff, and hopefully we can come up with a few ideas out of that. Of course, we're all bowling for Big Brothers and Big Sisters. Well, we weren't all bowling, but some of us were on Friday night, and I was back on Saturday. It was a very good event, so it's fun to get back out in the community again and do some things. So that's my report. Discussion of other business, 17, 18 motions that the committee rise.
Move the committee rise and report.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Back into formal session. Motion to adopt proceedings.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor O'Leary, that the action taken in Committee of the Whole in considering public meetings, deputations and presentations, public question period, matters arising from correspondence, reports of city staff, consent agenda, committee minutes, matters postponed, motions for which notice was previously given, and additional business be confirmed by this council.
Thanks. All in favor? That is carried. Do we have any notices of motion? Seeing none. Bylaws.
Through your worship, the bylaws listed for approval on tonight's agenda include the confirmatory bylaw, the notice policy bylaw, a bylaw to execute an agreement with In Situ Forum Technologies respecting 2018 CIPP capital reinvestment, a bylaw to execute a facility use agreement with Live Nation Concerts for a musical event, a bylaw to execute a contribution agreement with the Minister of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs for the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, bylaw to execute a site plan agreement with Community Living Owen Sound and District respecting property at 1290 3rd Avenue East, a bylaw to execute an agreement with Grey County for tiered emergency response, bylaw to execute a facility use agreement with the Attack respecting a live event, bylaw to execute a contribution agreement with Parks Canada Agency respecting Parks Canada's National Cost Sharing Program for heritage places for the former CP station, and finally, a bylaw to execute an Ontario transfer payment agreement with the Minister of Environment and Climate Change respecting the Source Protection Municipal Implementation Fund.
Good, thank you.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor O'Leary, that bylaw numbers 2018-21 through 2018-30 be passed and enacted.
Thanks. All in favor? That is carried. That completes our business for tonight. I've got 9:12 on the clock. Good meeting. Thanks, everyone.